The stars looked different from inside the cage. Marcus Chen pressed his face against the energy barrier, watching the alien constellations drift by through the viewport. His captors thought they had won. They thought humanity was finished. They were wrong. The Kraksathi ship hummed with a low vibration that made his bones ache. For 6 months, he had been their prize, their trophy. The last human, they called him. A living museum piece to parade before their allies as proof of their superiority. Marcus let them believe it. Let them think he was broken, defeated, just another conquered species added to their collection. In the shadows of his cell, Marcus had been watching, learning, memorizing. Every guard rotation, every access code tapped into the control panels, every weakness in their arrogant routine. The Kraksathi were efficient killers, but they had made one critical error. They assumed humans were like the other species they had conquered. They assumed once beaten, humans stayed beaten. The guard approaching his cell was young by Kraksathi standards, his forearms moving with the casual confidence of someone who had never known defeat. His scales shimmered purple in the ship's artificial light, and his 6 eyes barely glanced at the human prisoner as he deactivated the energy barrier for the daily feeding. Marcus stayed still, shoulders slumped, eyes downcast, the perfect image of a broken specimen. The guard stepped inside, carrying the tray of processed protein that passed for food. He set it down with a dismissive click of his mandibles, already turning to leave. That was when Marcus moved. Years of military training compressed into a single moment of violence. His hand shot out, fingers finding the soft spot between the guard's neck plates where the neural cluster sat exposed. The Kraksathi's eyes widened in shock as Marcus applied pressure with surgical precision, a technique he had perfected by studying their anatomy through months of careful observation. The guard dropped silently, his nervous system temporarily paralyzed. Marcus caught him before he hit the floor, dragging the heavy body deeper into the cell. His hands worked quickly, stripping the guard's equipment. The plasma rifle felt strange with its foregrip design, but Marcus had watched them use it enough times. The universal translator clipped behind his ear crackled to life. Moving to the cell entrance, Marcus peered into the corridor. Empty. Just as he knew it would be. The Kraksathi ran their ship on strict schedules, never deviating. It was efficient, logical, and it would be their downfall. The ship's layout burned clear in his mind. 6 months of being marched through these halls as a trophy had given him something the Kraksathi never expected. Intelligence. They had shown him their weapon stores, their command structure, their engine room, all while gloating about humanity's extinction. They never realized they were giving him everything he needed. Marcus moved through the corridors with purpose, avoiding the main thoroughfares. The maintenance shafts were cramped, designed for the insectoid Vreks who served as the ship's engineers. But humans were adaptable. Humans could fit into spaces their enemies never expected. In the weapons store, Marcus loaded himself with everything he could carry: plasma charges, proximity mines, a personal shield generator that flickered to life with a blue shimmer around his body. But it was the small device in the corner that made him smile grimly. A Kraksathi hunting beacon, used to track prey across star systems. He had seen them demonstrate it once, bragging about how no species could hide once marked. The engine room was his next stop. The massive power core thrummed with barely contained energy, feeding the ships faster than light drives. Marcus placed the plasma charges carefully, setting the timers for maximum confusion rather than immediate destruction. He needed chaos, not a quick death. He needed them to know fear. As he worked, his mind drifted to Earth, to the day the Kraksathi ships had darkened the sky. Humanity had fought with everything they had: nuclear weapons, biological warfare, guerrilla tactics that made the invaders pay for every inch of ground. But in the end, the technology gap was too great. Cities burned, continents fell, billions died. They had kept him alive as a curiosity, a reminder of their conquest. The last human, they said. But they were wrong about that too. Humans weren't just their bodies. Humans were their will, their rage, their refusal to surrender even in the face of annihilation. And as long as that will survived, humanity survived. The first explosion rocked the ship as Marcus reached the communications center. Alarms shrieked through the corridors. Kraxathi warriors rushed past, heading for the engine room. Marcus slipped inside the communication hub, finding it exactly as he remembered from his forced tours. His fingers flew across the alien controls, sending out a message on every frequency. Not a distress call, but a warning, a promise. The last human lived, and he was coming for them all. The ship's commander appeared on the main screen, his 6 eyes blazing with fury. Commander Thrax, the butcher of Mumbai, the destroyer of New York. Marcus had dreamed of this moment. "Impossible!" Thrax snarled through the translator. "The human is secure. This is some trick." Marcus stepped into view of the camera, letting Thrax see him clearly, see the weapons, see the determination burning in his eyes. "You made 3 mistakes, Thrax," Marcus said calmly. "First, you thought you killed us all. Second, you kept me alive. And third," he held up the hunting beacon, letting its red light pulse ominously, "you taught me how to use your own weapons." He activated the beacon and slapped it against his chest. The device burrowed through his clothes, embedding itself in his skin with a sharp pain that Marcus welcomed. Now every Kraxathi ship in the sector would be able to track him. Good. Let them come. "You're insane," Thrax hissed. "You've marked yourself for death. Every hunter in the Empire will come for you." "I'm counting on it," Marcus replied, backing toward the door. "You wanted a trophy, Thrax. The last human. But you forgot what humans are. We're not prey." Another explosion shook the ship. "We're persistence predators, and now the hunt begins." He destroyed the communication console with a blast from his plasma rifle and vanished into the chaos of the burning ship. Behind him, Thrax's roar of rage echoed through the speakers. The Kraxathi would come for him now. All of them. They would hunt him across the stars, drawn by the beacon he wore like a target on his chest. But they still didn't understand. The beacon wasn't marking him as prey, it was marking them as his. The escape pod bay was in chaos when Marcus arrived. Kraxathi crew members scrambled for the pods as their ship tore itself apart. Marcus moved through them like a ghost, his stolen weapons clearing a path. They had superior numbers, superior technology, superior strength, but they had never faced a human with nothing left to lose. He reached a pod just as the ship's artificial gravity failed. Bodies and debris floated in the sudden weightlessness. Marcus pulled himself inside the small craft, sealing the hatch as plasma fire scorched the air where he had been. The pod's controls were simple, designed for emergency use. Marcus programmed a course for the nearest inhabited system and launched. The dying ship fell away behind him, its hull cracking open like an egg, spilling its contents into the frozen void. In the pod's cramped confines, Marcus took inventory. Weapons, supplies, and most importantly, the data pad he had stolen from the communication center. It contained something the Kraxathi would never have let him see if they had known he could read their language. The locations of their slave worlds, the routes of their hunting fleets, the names and positions of every commander who had participated in Earth's destruction. He had a list now, and he had all the time in the universe. The stars streaked past as the pod entered hyperspace. Somewhere behind him, Thrax was probably already organizing the hunt, calling in favors, mobilizing fleets, turning the beacon on Marcus's chest into the greatest manhunt in Kraxathi history. They would come with their advanced ships and their superior weapons. They would come with their 4 arms and their 6 eyes and their absolute certainty that one human couldn't possibly be a threat to their empire. They would learn. The mining colony on Kepler 442b never saw him coming. Marcus had spent 3 weeks studying their routines from the frozen mountains that overlooked the facility. The Kraksathi had turned the human colony into a processing center, stripping the planet's resources with the same ruthless efficiency they had shown on 100 worlds. But they had grown comfortable. Soft. The guards played dice games during their shifts. The patrols followed the same paths every night. They had forgotten that danger could come from the shadows. Marcus struck during the shift change, when confusion was highest. The perimeter guards died silently, neural disruptors shutting down their nervous systems before they could raise an alarm. He moved through the facility like a phantom, planting charges, stealing supplies, gathering intelligence. The Kraksathi commander slept in a reinforced bunker at the center of the complex. Sub-Commander Vex, according to the stolen data pad. One of 37 names on Marcus's list. Vex had led the assault on Berlin, had broadcast the city's destruction to break human morale. Marcus disabled the bunker's security with codes he had memorized from the ship. The door slid open silently. Vex lay on his sleeping platform, 4 arms splayed out, breathing deep and even. Peaceful, unaware. The plasma blade hummed to life with a soft blue glow. Vex's 6 eyes snapped open, but Marcus was already moving. Not to kill, not yet. The blade carved through 2 of Vex's arms, sending them tumbling to the floor. The Kraksathi's scream of pain and shock filled the bunker. "You took something from me," Marcus said quietly, standing over the writhing alien. "My world, my family, my species. I can't take those back, but I can take everything from you." Vex tried to speak, purple blood pooling beneath him. Marcus didn't wait for words. The blade moved twice more, removing the remaining arms with surgical precision. The Kraksathi would live. The advanced medical technology they had stolen from conquered worlds would ensure that. But he would never hold a weapon again. Never give orders. Never be anything more than a reminder of human vengeance. Before leaving, Marcus pressed a small device against Vex's head. A neural transmitter, modified with human ingenuity and Kraksathi technology. Every moment of pain, every second of helpless rage would be broadcast directly to the hunting fleets. Let them feel what their prey felt. The facility burned behind him as Marcus vanished into the frozen wastes. By the time reinforcements arrived, he was already gone, leaving only destruction and a crippled commander whose screams echoed across the neural network. The hunter fleets found his trail on Proxima Station 2 weeks later. Marcus had been there, had killed 6 bounty hunters who tried to claim the prize on his head. But more disturbing than the deaths was what he left behind. The station's main plaza, where Kraksathi citizens gathered to socialize and trade, had been transformed into a memorial. Pictures covered every surface, thousands upon thousands of images, human faces, human cities, human art and music and culture. Everything the Kraksathi had destroyed, displayed for all to see. And in the center, written in perfect Kraksathi script, a simple message. "You missed one." The psychological warfare was as effective as the physical strikes. Kraksathi merchants reported seeing shadows where none existed. Guards fired at empty air. The hunting fleets grew larger, more desperate, but their prey remained elusive. How could one human evade the combined might of their empire? They didn't understand that humans had evolved as persistence hunters, that their ancestors had run prey to exhaustion across African savannas. That patience and planning were written into their DNA. Marcus didn't need to be faster or stronger. He just needed to be smarter, and he needed to never, ever stop. On the pleasure world of Thessex Prime, where Kraxathi elites came to celebrate their conquests, Marcus left a different kind of message. He infiltrated a victory gala, one commemorating the fall of Earth. The attendees laughed and drank, sharing war stories, comparing trophies taken from dead humans. The lights went out mid-celebration. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, revealing Marcus standing in the center of the room. The hunting beacon on his chest pulsed like a heartbeat. Guards raised their weapons, but Marcus made no move to attack or flee. "I want you to remember this moment," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the translator. "Remember how it feels to be prey. Remember the fear. Because I promise you, every last one of you will feel it again before I'm done." The plasma charges he had planted throughout the building detonated in sequence, not to kill, but to trap. Support beams crumbled, exits sealed. The planet's most elite killers found themselves caged like animals. Marcus walked through them untouched, the personal shield generator deflecting their panicked fire. He stopped at each one, looking into their 6 eyes, letting them see the cold determination in his. At the door, he paused. "The emergency services will reach you in 6 hours," he said. "The same amount of time it took my daughter to die after your bombing runs destroyed the shelter she was hiding in. Use that time to think about what's coming." He vanished into the night, but his presence lingered. The trapped Kraxathi spent those 6 hours in darkness, jumping at every sound, wondering if each moment would be their last. When rescue finally came, several had gone mad from fear. The others spoke in whispers of the humans' eyes, how they had seemed to look right through them, cataloging weaknesses, planning future hunts. The Empire responded with overwhelming force. Entire fleets dedicated to hunting one man, blockades around star systems, checkpoints on every trade route, billions in resources spent to catch a single human. It wasn't enough. Marcus adapted, evolved, learned. He studied their hunting patterns and turned them against themselves. When they searched planets, he hid on their own ships. When they guarded spaceports, he moved through maintenance tunnels. When they set traps, he used them to eliminate his rivals for their bounties. On the industrial world of Krax 9, he reprogrammed their automated defenses to fire on Kraxathi's ships. On the research station orbiting a dying star, he released their own biological weapons into the ventilation system, forcing them to abandon decades of work. On the prison moon where they kept conquered species, he destroyed the containment systems and armed the prisoners. Each strike was calculated for maximum psychological impact. He didn't just want to kill them. He wanted them to understand what they had done to humanity, to feel the helplessness, the despair, the knowledge that death could come at any moment from any direction. The neural transmitters he planted on victims created a network of fear. Commanders woke screaming from nightmares that weren't their own. Soldiers felt phantom pains from wounds they hadn't received. The collective trauma of his victims spread through their ranks like a virus, and through it all, the beacon pulsed on his chest. "Come find me," it said. "I'm right here. Come and face the last human." They came in ever greater numbers, and they found only death and madness. Ships discovered floating in space with their crews missing. Colonies that went silent, their populations fled or worse. Supply lines disrupted, trade routes abandoned. The very infrastructure of their empire beginning to crumble under the pressure of hunting one man. In the command center of the Kraxathi fleet, Supreme Commander Thrax stood before a wall of screens showing the devastation. Dozens of incidents, hundreds of deaths, billions in damage, all from one human they had dismissed as broken. "How?" his subordinate asked, mandibles clicking nervously. "How does he keep escaping? We have 10,000 ships hunting him." Thrax studied the patterns, beginning to see what they had missed. The attacks weren't random. They followed trade routes, supply lines, communication hubs. The human wasn't just running. He was mapping their entire empire, learning its weaknesses, preparing for something larger. Because we're not hunting him, Thrax realized, his 6 eyes widening. He's hunting us. He's been hunting us from the beginning. The subordinates' scales paled. Surely not. 1 human against the Empire? It's impossible. Thrax thought of Earth, of how they had laughed at human resistance, how they had dismissed human threats even as nuclear fire rained from the sky, how they had assumed victory even as humans fought to their last breath. We made the same mistake with their species that we made with him, Thrax said quietly. We thought once we beat them down, they would stay down. We thought fear would break them. But humans... He gestured at the screens showing the aftermath of Marcus's campaign. Humans turn fear into fury, and fury into focus. What do we do? Thrax was silent for a long moment. In the past 6 months, 1 human had done more damage to their military infrastructure than most civilizations managed in wars that lasted decades. Not through superior technology or numbers, but through sheer, relentless determination. We stop underestimating him, Thrax said finally. We stop thinking like predators and start thinking like prey, because that's what we are now. All of us, prey to the last human. As if in response to his words, alarms began screaming through the command center. Another attack. Another system compromised. Another reminder that humanity's greatest weapon had never been their technology or their numbers. It had always been their refusal to give up. The slave pens on Garrison 7 held 10,000 souls from a dozen conquered species. They had labored for years under Kraxathi whips, their spirits broken, their hope extinguished, until the night the lights went out and a human voice echoed through the darkness. "My name is Marcus Chen," the voice said, speaking through hacked speakers in a dozen languages simultaneously. "I was told I was the last human, but I've learned something in these months of hunting. Humanity isn't just about being born on Earth. It's about refusing to kneel, about fighting when fighting seems impossible. Tonight you have a choice. Stay in your cages or become human with me." The cell doors swung open. Not just a few, but all of them. Every lock in the facility disengaged at once. The prisoners stumbled out, blinking in confusion. Some ran immediately. Others stood frozen, unable to process sudden freedom. Marcus appeared among them like a ghost, distributing weapons he had stolen from the armory. His face was gaunt, marked by months of constant warfare, but his eyes burned with purpose. The hunting beacon on his chest pulsed steadily, a red heartbeat in the darkness. "They're coming," he told the assembled aliens. "The guards, the fleet, all of them. They'll be here in minutes. You can run, and maybe some of you will escape. Or you can stand with me and make them pay for every life they've taken." A Valdaran stepped forward, her blue scales scarred from years of labor. "You're the one they hunt, the ghost who haunts their nightmares. Why help us?" Marcus smiled grimly. "Because I've learned something else. 1 human can damage their empire. Imagine what 10,000 humans can do." The Valdaran looked at the weapon in her hands, then at her fellow prisoners. Years of suppressed rage flickered in her eyes. "I am Sarah of Valdara. My world burned as earth burned. If standing with you makes me human, then I choose to be human." Others stepped forward. Quellans with their crystalline bodies, insectoid Vrex who had maintained the very ships that enslaved them, even a few Northari whose peaceful civilization had been the first to fall to Kraxathi expansion, each one taking up arms, each one choosing to fight. When the Kraxathi response team arrived, they expected to find escaped slaves fleeing in panic. Instead, they found an army. Marcus had spent hours preparing the facility, turning every corridor into a killing field, every room into a trap. But more than that, he had given the prisoners something the Kraxathi had tried to destroy: hope. The battle was brutal and short. The Kraksathi had superior weapons, but they were facing beings who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Marcus moved through the combat like a conductor directing a symphony of destruction, coordinating the defenders, exploiting every weakness in Kraksathi tactics. When reinforcements arrived, they found their response team dead and the facility empty. The slaves had vanished into the wilderness, armed and organized. But more disturbing was the message left behind, written in the blood of their commanders. Humanity lives. The rebellion spread like wildfire. On mining worlds and agricultural colonies, slaves who had been docile for decades suddenly rose up. They called themselves humans, regardless of species. They painted the symbol of Earth on their banners. They fought with tactics learned from intercepted broadcasts of Marcus's attacks. The Kraksathi Empire, built on the assumption that conquered species stayed conquered, began to crack under the pressure. Resources dedicated to hunting Marcus had to be diverted to suppress uprisings. Fleets sent to maintain order found themselves ambushed by slaves who had spent years learning their weaknesses. And through it all, Marcus continued his personal war. But now he wasn't alone. The neural network he had created with his transmitters became a communication system for the rebellion. Victims of his attacks didn't just broadcast fear anymore. They broadcast intelligence, troop movements, vulnerabilities. On the fortress world of Krak's Prime, seat of their military command, panic set in as reports flooded in from across the Empire. A holographic map showed system after system falling into chaos. Red markers indicating Marcus sightings, blue markers showing slave uprisings. The two types of markers were beginning to merge. Supreme Commander Thrax stood before the military council, his scales dull with exhaustion. "He's not just one human anymore," he reported. "He's created an idea, a myth. Species that have been enslaved for generations are calling themselves human, fighting like humans, dying like humans." "Impossible," Council Elder Drax hissed. "Humans are extinct. We made sure of it." "Did we?" Thrax challenged. "We destroyed their bodies, burned their cities, but we kept their memory alive with our trophies and our boasting. And now that memory has taken flesh in Chen. He's shown them that we can be beaten. Worse, he's shown them how." The council chamber erupted in arguments. Some demanded more brutal crackdowns. Others suggested negotiation. A few even whispered about evacuation, abandoning the outer systems to consolidate power. Their debate was interrupted by alarms. The fortress world's orbital defenses had detected an incoming ship, a single vessel, broadcasting on all frequencies. Marcus Chen's face appeared on the main screen. He looked different than in the early hunts, harder, more focused. The beacon on his chest pulsed like a second heart. "Kraksathi Empire," he began, his voice carrying the weight of months of warfare. "I am Marcus Chen, last son of Earth, first father of the new humanity. You took my world, you took my people, but you made one mistake. You let me live to remember them." He paused, letting the silence build tension. Around him on the screen, shapes moved in the shadows. Other beings, all species, all wearing the mark of Earth. "I've spent months showing you what one human can do. Now let me show you what humanity can do. Every slave you've taken, every world you've conquered, every life you've destroyed, they're all human now, and we're coming home." The transmission cut. Immediately, reports began flooding in. Coordinated attacks across 50 systems, slave uprisings backed by stolen military hardware, ships hijacked by their Vrex engineers, biological weapons released by Quellan scientists who had been forced to develop them. But the worst news came from the sensor stations. The ship approaching Krak's Prime wasn't alone. Behind it, hundreds of vessels appeared from hyperspace. Stolen cargo haulers converted into warships, mining vessels bristling with improvised weapons, a fleet built from the cast-offs and scraps of empire, held together by determination and rage. In the command center, Thrax watched the approaching fleet with something almost like admiration. They had superior numbers, superior technology. By any logical assessment, the makeshift armada should be easily destroyed. But logic had failed them when it came to humans. "All fleets prepare for combat," he ordered. Then, more quietly, "And may the gods help us. We're about to learn what it truly means to fight humanity." The battle for Crax Prime would enter legend, told differently by each species that survived it. The Craxathi spoke of the human ghost who seemed to be everywhere at once, coordinating attacks with impossible precision. The former slaves told of the moment they realized they were no longer property but people, fighting for the right to exist. But all agreed on one detail. As the fleets engaged, as plasma fire lit the void and ships died by the dozens, a single transmission echoed across every frequency. Marcus Chen's voice, calm and certain. "You called me the last human. You were wrong. I'm the first of many, and we will never stop coming." The fortress world's shields flickered under the assault. Not from superior firepower, but from 1,000 small strikes hitting simultaneously. Mining charges attached to shield generators by Vrex, who knew every maintenance tunnel. Computer viruses uploaded by Quellen, who had been forced to program the systems. Biological agents released by Northari, who had developed immunity while creating them. Every conquered species brought their expertise to the fight. And binding them together was the human strategy of persistence, of adaptation, of turning enemy strength into weakness. They had learned from Marcus, but more than that, they had learned from humanity's example. As the fortress's defenses crumbled, Thrax found himself thinking of Earth's final days. How the humans had fought with sticks and stones when their weapons failed. How they had used their own bodies as weapons when nothing else remained. How they had made the Craxathi pay in blood for every inch of ground. He had thought them foolish then. Primitive, unable to accept the reality of their defeat. Now, watching his empire's heart under assault by beings who fought with that same desperate fury, he understood the truth. They hadn't been fighting to win. They had been fighting to show that fighting was possible, to plant the seed of resistance that would grow when the time was right. Marcus Chen wasn't an anomaly. He was the inevitable result of leaving even one human memory alive in the universe. The command center shook as another explosion rocked the fortress. Through the smoke and chaos, Thrax saw him. Marcus Chen, leading a strike team through the breach. The human looked directly at him, and in those eyes Thrax saw not hatred but purpose. Cold, implacable purpose. "You wanted a trophy," Marcus said, raising his weapon. "The last human. But you never understood. There's no such thing as the last human. As long as one person anywhere refuses to kneel, humanity survives. And now?" He gestured at the mixed species fighters pouring through the breach. "Now humanity is everywhere." The throne room of the Craxathi Empire had stood for 1,000 years, its obsidian walls lined with trophies from conquered worlds. Now it burned, plasma fire licking at tapestries woven from the silk of extinct species. Marcus Chen stood before Supreme Commander Thrax, the hunting beacon on his chest, pulsing in rhythm with the emergency lighting. Around them, the battle for Crax Prime raged on. Former slaves and Craxathi loyalists fought corridor by corridor, room by room. The sound of combat echoed through the fortress, a symphony of ending and beginning. "You've destroyed everything," Thrax said, his 6 eyes fixed on the human. "Billions will die in the chaos you've created. The peace we enforced is shattered." Marcus laughed, a sound without humor. "Peace? You called it peace when you stood on the ashes of my world? When you displayed my daughter's toy in your museum of conquest?" He gestured at the burning trophies. "That wasn't peace. That was silence. And silence isn't the same as surrender." Thrax's 4 arms moved to his weapons, but Marcus was faster. The plasma blade swept through the air, and two of the commander's arms fell away. Thrax dropped to his knees, purple blood pooling on the ancient floor. "You asked how one human could do this," Marcus continued, standing over his fallen enemy. "But you never understood. It wasn't one human. It was the idea of humanity, the refusal to accept defeat, the determination to make tyrants pay. You kept me alive as a trophy, as proof of your victory. Instead, you kept the spark that would burn your empire to ash." From the shadows, others emerged. Sierra of Valdara, her blue scales now marked with the symbol of Earth. Vrex engineers who had sabotaged 1,000 ships from within. Quellan scientists who had turned Kraxathi weapons against their creators. Northari pacifists who had learned that sometimes peace required war. "The last human stands before you," Sierra announced, her voice carrying the authority of the liberated. "But he stands not alone. We are all human now. We have learned his ways, adopted his cause. Wherever oppression exists, humanity will rise to fight it." Thrax looked at the assembled beings, understanding finally dawning in his eyes. "You've infected them, turned them into you." "No," Marcus said quietly. "I showed them they were already like me. Every species that refuses to die quietly. Every being that chooses to fight rather than submit. They were always human. They just needed someone to remind them." The fortress shuddered as another section collapsed. The Empire's heart was dying. Its regulatory systems failing, its chains of command shattered. Across 100 worlds, similar scenes played out. Some Kraxathi surrendered, accepting judgment from those they had enslaved. Others fought to the last, unable to comprehend a universe where they were not supreme. Marcus knelt beside Thrax, studying the being who had ordered Earth's destruction. "You have a choice now, the same choice you gave us. Die as the last of the old empire, or live to see the new universe we're building." "What universe?" Thrax asked, his voice weak from blood loss. "Without our order, there will be chaos, wars between species, struggles for resources." "Yes," Marcus agreed. "There will be conflict, but it will be honest conflict, not the false peace of slaves and masters, and from that conflict, something better will grow. Something where every species has a chance to reach for the stars on their own terms." He stood, turning to address the mixed group of fighters. "Send word to all systems. The Kraxathi Empire has fallen. Any who wish to surrender will be given fair trial. Any who continue to fight will face humanity's fury, and any species still in chains." He smiled, the first genuine smile in months. "Tell them they're free. Tell them they're human if they choose to be." The word spread faster than light, carried by quantum communications and fleeing ships. The empire that had lasted a millennium crumbled in days. Some systems descended into chaos, as Marcus had predicted. Others formed immediate alliances, former slaves working together to build something new. But the most surprising development came from the Kraxathi themselves. Stripped of their power, forced to face the consequences of their actions, many experienced something they had never allowed themselves to feel: remorse. Young Kraxathi, born into the Empire but not yet stained by its crimes, began to question their elders. Some even approached the former slaves, asking to learn, to understand, to somehow atone. Marcus watched it all from the bridge of a repurposed battleship, now serving as the flagship of the Liberation Fleet. The hunting beacon still pulsed on his chest, but its meaning had changed. No longer a mark of prey, it had become a symbol of hope. Across the galaxy, beings touched their own chests in salute when they saw it. Sierra joined him at the observation window, watching the stars wheel by. "What now, last human? The Empire is broken. Your list of names is complete. What drives you forward?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I started this for vengeance, to make them pay for Earth, for my family, for everything they took. But somewhere along the way, it became something more. It became about ensuring this never happens again. And how do we do that? By remembering, Marcus said. By teaching. By staying human. He turned to face her. The Kraxathi thought they could break us by killing our bodies. But humanity isn't flesh and blood. It's the choice to keep fighting when logic says surrender. It's the decision to help others even when you can barely help yourself. It's the refusal to let tyrants win, no matter the cost. Word came of another system liberated, another world where former slaves were taking their first free breaths in generations. Each victory was small compared to the scale of the galaxy, but together they formed an unstoppable tide. The council that formed to govern the liberated territories was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Every species represented, every voice heard. They called it the Human Coalition, though less than 1% of its members were from Earth. When asked about the name, they simply said, "Because we choose to be human. All of us." Marcus stood before this council, the weight of months of warfare visible in his bearing. "I was called the last human," he began. "But I learned I was wrong. Humanity didn't die with Earth. It spread. Every time the Kraxathi enslaved a world, they planted seeds of humanity. Every being they oppressed became potentially human, and when the time came, those seeds grew." He removed the hunting beacon from his chest, the device that had marked him as prey and predator both. "This beacon called hunters to me, but it also called the oppressed to hope. Let it stand as reminder. When tyrants rise, humanity rises to meet them. When the powerful prey on the weak, humans hunt the hunters. And when they say resistance is impossible..." He placed the beacon on the council table, where it pulsed with its steady red light. "We proved them wrong." The years that followed were not easy. Building from the ashes of empire never is. There were conflicts, setbacks, moments when the old ways seemed simpler. But whenever doubt crept in, beings across the galaxy would remember the story. One human who refused to break. One spark that lit a billion fires. One man who turned prey into predator and slaves into humans. Marcus Chen lived to see the first new world colonized by the Coalition. Lived to see former enemies working side by side. Lived to see the word human become synonymous not with a species from a dead world, but with the unconquerable spirit that refuses to bow to tyranny. When he finally passed, old and surrounded by beings of every species who called him friend, teacher, liberator, his last words were recorded for history. "They called me the last human. They were wrong. I was just the first to remember what it means. Now you all remember. Keep that memory alive. Stay human." His body was laid to rest on New Earth, a world given to the survivors and descendants of humanity's diaspora. But his legacy lived on in every free world, every liberated slave, every being who chose to fight rather than submit. The hunting beacon was placed in a museum, still pulsing with its eternal rhythm. Children of all species would stand before it, learning the story. How the Kraxathi Empire fell not to superior weapons or numbers, but to an idea. The idea that no matter how powerful the oppressor, how complete the defeat, how final the victory seems, somewhere a human will rise. And humans, they learned, are never truly alone. Because humanity is not a species. It's a choice, a promise, a warning to tyrants across space and time. Underestimate humans at your peril. For when you strike at one, you teach the universe to strike back. When you hunt one human, you risk becoming prey to all humanity, and humanity, once awakened, never sleeps again. In the depths of space, in council chambers and slave quarters, in the hearts of the free and the dreams of the oppressed, the message echoes still. Humanity lives. Humanity endures. Humanity hunts those who would hunt the innocent. And there is no such thing as the last human.